I wanted to talk, do a teaching today. Again, if you watch this online, more power to you. It's also, I think there's everything in this is applicable to everybody, but we kind of do this to strengthen our teams, to strengthen our church, to build our culture. We're big believers in, plant the fruit today that you want to eat tomorrow. And so if you're new to People Church, we're a church in Chicago, Toronto, and we kind of, build in urban settings. That's what we feel the vision of God is over our life. But this is our Staffy. It is made up of those that are on staff, those that believe they will be one day, those that we wish we could put on tomorrow, today, yesterday. And it's really our leadership teaching, but we've always called it Staffy and it's stuck. So Staffy because we're Aussies too. We shorten things. I'm Aussie. Gio's Aussie. It's new. It's like Saul became Paul, Gio became an Aussie. It's just what it is, right? Yeah. He was with me today. She's like, that's beautiful. There's so much beauty and transformation. So anyway, that's kind of a bit of who we have here on here. But for all of us here, People Church people, teams, I wanted to talk about something that I think is really, really crucial. I do think most of us as humans don't like it. If we do like it, I think maybe we don't always do it well. And even for those that are okay with it, there is some sort of a connotation to it. And I think we all got to get better at it because I think it is the number one church killer. It is the number one relationship killer. And it is basically conflict. I want to talk about it not because it's going on, but this is what my learnings are as a leader and pastor of, leader of a home and pastor of a community and all the rest of a church, is that we often only talk about things when they're happening and they need to be talked about. But I feel like that's kind of sometimes, whilst it's good to do it, it would have been better done earlier. Yeah. And so I'm thinking, hey, I haven't sensed a lot of conflict lately, but that means we should talk about it. Mm-hmm. Because I think that there's a lot around it. And I think today's going to have some space for conversation and questions. But I thought I'd teach a little bit on it and bring a bit on it because I think it's going to be really helpful. I think it's helpful in a few areas, okay? How you do conflict is usually derived out of a few spaces. It's derived out of how you grew up seeing it done. So some people are explosive conflictors, you know what I mean? It's like, bah! And then it's like done. That's how they saw it done, and that's conflict to them. Other people, I'm not going to talk about conflict, but you will feel that we are at conflict with my passive aggression. There are those that bury and believe that conflict is just not worth the time. I mean, come on, it's a hassle. We talk about feelings, gross. We have to do things. Let's just all forget about it. You know what I mean? Lauren's laughing and pointing at herself. There's a lot of that, okay? So conflict comes out of that. Conflict sometimes comes out of our personality types. You could be a real challenger. You could be a real empath. You could be a real, all sorts of different things. You could be a real, linear thinker. And that kind of conflict's interesting because that conflict comes 1 + 1 = 2, and sometimes there's no emotion to it. And that leaves questions like, should emotion be involved in it? Isn't it just logical? What is the place of emotion if it's not based on fact? Well, the truth is there is place for emotion. It does speak to a quotient of the human experience. It says a lot about the way we interpret and the way we define things. And so there's space for it. But at the same time, there's real need for the anchor of fact. And they actually work parallel pathed together. And that will forever be Maddie's saying, parallel pathing. She just went for a meeting streak in church for a minute where she was parallel pathing everything. She runs our creative and she'd be like, we're doing this at the same time as we're doing this. And we parallel path here. So there's a few different ways that we think about conflict, okay? We often, I think, believe this lie and this misconception that peace is kind of, I think it's a misplaced ideal that the truest indicator of peace is best represented as quiet, smiling, agreeable, compliance without complaint. We think that is peace. And if that is our measure of peace, we will do everything. Well, one, we will die by the lie that it's true. Like, oh, if everyone's smiling, if everybody's like compliant, if everybody's agreeable, if everybody's good, then there must be peace.
Right.
And that also then brings this ideal that sharp disagreement, contention, discussion, even an approached subject with a heated response is the lack of peace. And therefore what we'll do is we stay away from any of that. It's like, man, I don't want to talk to Maddie, because if I talk to Maddie, she's going to fly off the handle. She's not going to take it well. If I speak to my husband, if I talk to my wife, if I'm honest with my pastor, if I tell my grow group leader, if I tell the person I'm leading, they're just going to get hurt. They're going to get frustrated. And that's not peace. In fact, that's going to be counter peace. But the truth is that that's not really what peace is. Let's bring I'm going to put a thing out there. My whole goal today is to help you rewire how you think about conflict. Because I think that's the biggest problem with conflict, is how we think about it makes us run from it. And I think that what we've got to understand, to everything in this world, there is a cost. Nothing is free. Let's think of it from the perspective of just even in Genesis as a promise. For as long as the earth remains, there'll be seed time and harvest. So a sowing is an action, right? It's a work-oriented action, and it brings a reaping. So to everything that we want, we first have to sow. So if we want to sow for future peace, if we want to reap future peace, that means you have to sow things that don't maybe look like the equal opposite to what you're trying to gain, right? So some people think, man, if I want to feel better, I need to sow rest. But that's not exactly true in all aspects of what gives you energy. In order to actually reap energy, you have to sow hard work. So you actually have to sow a moment of feeling depleted, tired, and exhausted in order to increase your capacity for output in order to feel more restful. It's funny that being restful actually comes from actually increasing your ability to work, and increasing your ability to work increases your max load. And by increasing your max load, you don't find the load of the day as difficult as you once did. So like by going to the gym more and doing more leg workouts, it's funny that you don't get tired walking more, because you've increased. And so what used to be strenuous is no longer strenuous because you've increased your strain. And I think what we don't often realize, right, is that if we want to get peace, we have to sow things that seem to what we've been taught to be counter peace. And why do I bring this? I think we don't understand the concept of cost, and we also don't understand the concept of, what would I say, like cost and reward, in the sense of like, okay, do I pay this up front? And yes, it is a cost, and a cost I don't want to do, but the cost of doing X actually avoids the cost of not doing it, which is Y, and it's much higher. So for example, I cannot afford an oil change. Okay, why? Because an oil change is expensive. Okay, cool, it is expensive. However, if you don't pay for the oil change, you will lose your engine.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And that's something that every young person that first gets a car and was used to their parents paying for things or whatever, learns that valuable lesson. If I don't pay for maintenance, I will have to pay for a new car. And I think in that analogy, you have to pay and you have to fork out payments in conversations and relationships that seem costly in the moment, because otherwise you'll have to pay the cost of needing new relationships. Why do I bring this? I bring it because I think it's imperative. God put it on my heart this year that I would do a series on biblical conflict. And this is more of our leadership kind of forum on it. But why? I think just so many people leave churches, leave relationships based on this idea of peace, and I think secondarily love. Love is intrinsic to every single one of us. We want to feel loved, we want to feel safe, we want to feel seen, we want to feel heard, we want to feel known. And what we think that the truest measure of love is when you love me the way I intuitively want to be loved. Well, I internally want to be loved and you intuitively know it. That's what we think is true love. This is why girls and guys often say to their significant other, well, I want you to just, they say this, but what they mean is something different. I want you to want to do it. What they're saying is, I want you to do it out of your own volition without my prompting. Because to me, I, in my world frame, from where I come from and who I am, think that true love is when you serve me. And if I have to tell you, then you're doing it because I told you, not because you want to. But that, what we limit ourselves in our understanding is that that's just the way I perceive it. This is what I want. And now what we do is we think that the relationships that are healthiest for us, most best love us, are the relationships that do this for us without us having to express anything. But the truth is we all love different, we all receive love different, we all live different. And if we do not get good at expressing our needs and allowing a true sense of love, being people that are actually open and faithful enough to pay those prices, then what we'll go through is these conflicts within ourselves of feeling and believing that people don't truly care. And I think when it comes to conflict and to the subject of like peace and investment and conversation, is I don't think that in church and in relationships and in the body of Christ, we have a good understanding of how to communicate our needs. And we think that basically needs not being met are a true indicator of no one caring and no one loving. And I've seen that this is a fact of the matter on how you do marriage, on how you do relationships, on how you do work, on how you do employment. Why does this tie into conflict? Because conflict is as simple as stopping someone and saying, I don't feel loved. I don't feel valued. I don't feel like you care. But we don't do that. What we basically say is, you're not a caring person. You're just not a loving person. I had someone in the foyer ask me a really great question. They're new to the church, great person, hungry for God. And they just said this, hey, I'm loving this. I'm super surprised that I'm in a church this big and I got connected this quick, but I'm still waiting to be poured into. Now, with some years of experience, some relational experience under my belt, I actually realized that the better question to ask this person, rather than, oh, who's your leader or why aren't you being poured into, is this. Please go away and tell me two things. Split it up into two categories for me. What is it to be biblically discipled? And then second thing, how do you best feel poured into?
That's great. That's great.
Because the way that I would feel poured into, and I'd imagine maybe, Audrey feels poured into, are so different. I feel poured into when you trust me enough to include me in on your battles. When you trust me enough, or you love me enough to tell me what I need to shift, or you tell me that I could maybe run for a goal. I feel super poured into when someone sits with me at that level because of the way I'm wired. But Audrey might feel more poured into when someone sits, sees, hears where she's at, and sometimes just that without anything further, and then she feels poured into. Both are pouring into. Why? I'm a different shaped vessel, so what fills my vessel is different to anyone else's. So when they said that, I kind of said, well, what do you want? Why? Because I'm trying to avoid conflict down the road, or teach this person how to get to good conflict, because most of us want something out of a relationship. We go into every relationship. We go into every grow group. We go into every date. We go into every vacation. We go into every coffee with an expectation of what we want. And how this ties into conflict is that what we don't often realize is that these unmet expectations warrant and require conversations if you can't reconcile it and get over it. What does good community conversation do? Well, it calibrates. We have this great arbitrator called the Word of God. And the arbitrator of the Word of God gives us standardized functions of what we should expect and what is fair and what is right and what is good. It also gives us this actual standardized tapping into last week on Sunday's message, that we draw from Jesus things that only he can give us. He is deeper than Jacob's well, but your leader's not. And I think what we do is we misplace that we should be sitting at the well with Jesus, and we make ourselves, and we put expectations on people, and those expectations are deeper than they are deep. And you overdraw, and you get frustrated when the bucket comes up empty, and you live as a serial well hopper instead of being someone that allows Jesus to fill you. And these are many other sources of conflict. And if you couple that with conversation, because we're all broken, like I love Nathan Finocchio said today, to think that you're not pure, that God only moves on purity, is to think that you're more pure in a sense than you really are. Because the truth is we're all broken, flawed, and the fact that God would use us is really crazy in and of itself. And I put all this out there in the hopes that instead of suffering or being angry or being entitled or being the victim or being the hero or being the villain in your head, you need to have conversations.
Yes.
Yeah.
You need to talk more, and you need to confront, and you need to have conversations. Because for me, when I'm talking leaders and replicable leaders and people that could be pastors, one thing I will know there's two things I think I stand on now at 40 about leaders. And I would tell you this: I would never trust anybody with a high position of leadership that can't do two things: cannot gather and cannot confront. Confrontation doesn't mean you blast people. Confrontation doesn't mean that you always fight someone. Confrontation just means that you are honest enough to have conversations that really must take place.
Yeah.
So these are two great proverbs that one I've cited many a time, but Proverbs 27 verse 17 says this: as iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend. So we get this idea that out of friction, which is two conversations or two separate perspectives coming together, all of a sudden there is a sharpening. You and I get sharper and better and more like Christ when we start having conversations that we're avoiding. And I think this: how do you know you need a conversation? When you're eye rolling, you need to be having conversations. When you went from I can't wait to hug this person to side hugging them because I'm kind of frustrated with them.
Yeah.
When you've been waiting for someone to come apologize about something that you would never do yourself, and you've been waiting for more than 48 hours and they haven't apologized. Because typically that's like, man, I can't believe Shannon did, and I'm just going to say it. I'm going to wait and see if she apologizes. And she doesn't apologize, and now all of a sudden there's slowly every day, every hour that thought skims through your mind, brick by brick, it's building a wall.
Yes.
True.
And here's the thing about walls: at first they keep someone out, but eventually they keep things out.
Yes.
You can't choose. There's not walls that everything else can run through except the person you built it for. You know what I mean? No, they keep everything out. And then you become a critical, cynical leader who isolates themselves and says things like, the leadership journey is lonely. Or you say things like, people cannot be trusted. That's not true. Because you don't know the you in it. You don't know the real them in it. There's a difference between intent and impact. And you've got to have conversations. And I know that a leader that won't have conversations and a leader that cannot gather is not someone that can be trusted with leadership. Because what will happen is this: quite often as a leader, we basically think that it is better not to have the conversation, and we believe in pan theory. It's gonna pan out. It doesn't pan out. It multiplies.
Yeah.
That's what happens. It multiplies. And it gets unhealthy, and you get unhealthy, and we get to a point where we say things like this. The amount of people that I've heard say, I just had to move on because there was no agreement. Okay. But please cite the disagreement. If there's no conversation, if there's no disagreement, you can't move on from people.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think there's a fundamental problem when you have somewhere to run to.
Yeah, that's very good.
And in marriages, one of the best gifts to a new marriage is a small house.
Yeah. That's good.
There's no basement to run to. There's no golf tee time to run to. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes that is one of the best gifts. Because when COVID made us a better family. Because we had nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It made us a much better family because we had to. We had to be here. The marriage commitment is the ideal that there's nowhere to run. So it makes you a better marriage. The ideal of never even saying the divorce word actually makes you a better marriage because there's nowhere to run to. But in a church setting, what does that look like? Imagine, I mean, this doesn't happen. There'd be no way for me to police this or even ever want to enforce this. But sometimes in the church, if the church is a home with many rooms, every room is represented by a different team and a different grow group leader. And sometimes rather than have conversations with the grow group leader we run to a new grow group leader. Instead of talking to the team lead we go to a different team.
Right.
And the problem is it robs everybody. Because this doesn't say as a friend sharpens, as iron sharpens iron, a friend sharpens a friend. It doesn't say as iron sharpens iron, one friend gets sharpened.
Right.
It says a friend sharpens a friend. Everybody benefits when real conversations take place.
Right.
So like conflict, I think, is intrinsic to your growth. It's one of the best ways you serve the body. Imagine, conflict to me is like when I actually experience back pain. Or when I cut myself and I experience the paper cut pain. Conflict is when there is a pain that alerts me that something is wrong. Conflict in the body is pain. But pain is an indicator that something must be fixed, addressed, stretched, or rested. And that is one of the best things you and I could get good at when it comes to leading in a community, a faith-based community, having good marriages, is having good conversations. So the first thing I think is understand that the misplaced ideal is that conversations that aren't well received are not worth having. Have you ever heard someone say, or have you yourself said this? See, this is why I'm not honest. You know what I mean? Like, it's a crazy saying in a sense, because it's kind of like, I think we believe that, like, if I was to say something to Eva, like, I don't know, whatever it might be, or Shannon or Audrey or like Courtney or Jack, you know what I mean? And they take it difficult to start with. And I go, this is why I'm not honest. What am I supposed to expect, right? Like, even in areas of marriage where maybe I did something wrong and I come and I say something and then Audrey's like, blows up and like, see, woman, this is why you can't, we say things like this, you can't handle truth. No, well, not all truth is clean. And there's repercussion. And Jack and I have had some heated conversations. And I'll tell you what, we're better for it.
Yeah.
But imagine if I go, well, this is why I can't talk to you, Jack. And Jack says to me, well, this is why I don't even.
Right.
Human relationship is messy.
Yeah.
And if you embrace the mess, it actually gets cleaner. Because the mess is actually messy because portions of you that need to be chipped away get chipped away. Have you ever seen somebody work on wood or sculptures or anything? There's a lot of mess.
Yeah.
But if it wasn't for embracing the mess of chipping away, there wouldn't be something worth looking at.
Yeah.
Think of every moment of conflict as chipping away at pieces that don't need to be there. And if you want to be left with something admirable and something worth looking at and something to put on display so that the world can see it, it first had to go through series after series after series of conflict and chipping and moving. So I want to ask, this is rhetorical for yourself. Could it be possible that maybe you could think of three people that maybe you need to have a conversation with? And I'll give you a guide in a second for what kind of conversations could possibly take place, but I'm just putting it out there. 3 people that you think. Maybe you could think about 3 things that maybe you're just confused about. And what I mean by that is sometimes I think we have these moments with people and we're left asking lots of questions but no clarity. Like, what do they mean by that? Mm-hmm. Man, is that right? I mean, should that happen? Should our relationship happen that way? Is this what it is to have a leader? Is this what it's like to be in a work environment? Should I be saying yes to everything? Am I over-rostered? Am I overworked? Should I be passionate? I'm not passionate. Is that a problem? Like all these questions that you can't answer by yourself, they need to come out.
Yeah. Great.
Rumination is one of the worst things that I think a human can do.
Yeah.
And what rumination is, when you regurgitate something and then swallow it again. Regurgitate it and then swallow it again. That's what cows do with grass. They have 5 stomachs and they move the same piece of meal through all of them. And I think what we do as humans quite often is rather than have a simple conversation, we regurgitate the conversation over and over and over and over and over. And I'm going to tell you this, let me give you a truth. The road to understanding is hard work.
Yeah.
It's hard work. Man, there's going to be some people you could just talk easily with. There's other people with that it's over and over and you say the same thing and you say the same thing and you say it different and you think you said it different and you didn't say anything any different until one day it drops. Me and Jack, I think we've like gotten better with our communication, but we're very different people. Me and Audrey are very different people. Me and like other people are very different, but then I've got some people like me and Jake. Me and Jake, I think, speak kind of, we just get each other. Mm-hmm. And I think me and Gio can get each other. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, and I think that there's this idea that the best relationships are the easy ones.
Yeah.
But I don't think so.
Right. Yeah, preach that.
Because for me, the iron sharpening iron, I've found has extreme value. There's extreme comfort in this one, and there's value still. But man, there's value in the, like, we've said this 17 times. You know what it makes me do? It makes me ask the question, what am I really saying?
Yeah.
It makes me stop and ask, why am I really feeling it?
Yeah.
And then it actually opens me up to how someone else thinks it, feels it, and a greater sense of that truest reality on that subject.
Yeah.
It also makes me wonder, do I want to be right because right is a security issue for me? Mm-hmm. To be wrong is to be bad. All these things matter and you need to confront. If you're a leader and you don't like a behavior, you need to confront it.
Yes.
If you're finding that you're getting bitter about something, you have to have a conversation about it. Because if you do not confront it, and I've said this time and time again, and I'll say it because it doesn't matter how much you say something in leadership, it always needs to be said again. If you don't confront it, it will eventually confront you.
Yes. Yeah.
No one ever leaves a marriage, a friendship, a grow group, or a church overnight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good one.
It's always been brewing.
Yeah.
And what I think is that there is a lot of that in marriages, a lot of that in relationships. Today we live in a day and age where cancelling is just gold. It's just what you do. You know what I mean? Love is seen as agreement and there's no disagreements ever done. And what that does is it makes you a really bad leader. In fact, I'm also bringing this because I've had a few different grow groups come up to me this year and go, man, I've got a culture I don't like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I sat on a plane years ago, going back to Australia, first few months of the church, and I remember saying to God, my first thing I complained about I just sat in the chair and I said, God, this is not the church you promised me. I do not like this church. And God just said one simple thing to me, and it rocked me, but it freed me at the same time. And he said this, you're building to attract people. Build to attract me, and the people will follow. And you know what? There was a root there. There was an open door for me to embrace this concept, and the open door was simply this. I had never been the full buck stops with me leader of an initiative or organization before, ever. And this was the first time that my calling, my purpose was also what put food on my plate. And not just my plate, but my 2 children and my wife. And no one is there to say, no one's going to write me a check. No one can save me in this moment. So I started to become really crowd conscious instead of conviction conscious. So I started being like, well, let me not just preach this because that might rock the people. And let me just get until we got a bit more like financial stability, and then I'll rock the people with some things. And then I'll only rock them until we hit our bottom line. And once we hit bottom line, I'll play smooth again because this is my livelihood. And God's simple statement basically taught me that I had a fear of man. And fear of man was making me pull punches because you'll never lead what you're too afraid to lose.
Right.
You'll never lead the friendship if you're afraid to lose it. You'll never lead the company if you're afraid to lose it. You'll never lead the team if you're afraid to lose it. You'll never lead the marriage. You'll never lead your healing if you're afraid to lose like a sense of peace. You'll never do anything like that. And so you can't be afraid to lose things, because what you've done is you've turned the thing you're afraid to lose into an idol. And because it's an idol, you won't talk about it. You won't discuss it. And here's another thing in your life. Most of the things you're offended about are because you have idols in your life and someone's rocked them. The sacred cows in your life, someone's come for something that you believe should not be touched. You don't talk about this. You don't bring this. I've given enough. I've said enough. I've done enough. I've served enough. And now you're coming for this? This is the one thing. Or maybe it's the one thing you've prided yourself on. What I found is where I've been complimented the most is where I get offended the easiest. You're a great preacher. You're a great preacher. You're a great preacher. And then someone finally gives you feedback on your preaching. Like, excuse me, I'm great. Don't you know that? You're a great leader. You're a great strategist. You're so humble. You're so this, you're so that. I'll tell you what you've built your compliments on is also what will cut you the deepest. And that's why I often find that the person that says, I love feedback the most is the person that gets cut the most if I tell them they're not good with it. But it's what happens, right? It's part of it's our DNA. And these are all sources, I think, of conflict, guys, that I just think that to not have conflict is also a source of assuming that you're right.
Yeah, very good.
To not talk about it means you're the final word on it. Nothing else must be said. I know I'm right. And I think that you lack the ability to grow, because what if you're wrong? But I saw it. I've got to say, I guess you're in the thick of relationship when you lead and you pastor, but I just can't think of a time where I didn't have a part to play. Do you know what I mean? There's always something. Gio and I just recently had a conversation, and not the one you guys are thinking about, because that one I had to walk away from. I was blacking out. But me and Gio got into it, and I was pretty convinced Gio's just the worst person ever. He needs a lot of healing, and I can't wait to just pray this out of him. I was ready. I was like, I don't need Audrey right now. I got to cast something out of Gio right now. In fact, I might need to cast Gio out of something. I don't know. And then when Gio came and had a conversation with me, I was ready. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, I could see how I maybe did that. There was a part of me. Do you know what I mean? Like, even in that. And sometimes it's a simple misread. Like, well, I thought you meant something different by that. Yeah. But there's always a part to play. Even in our most recent, there's always a part to play. There's just something. And I want to tell you that, like, the lie of the enemy is pride. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? The lie of the enemy is that you're 100% right. Yeah. And that you are so justified to feel that way. And I bring this just because, look, I think more than anything today, I wanted to attack ideology around conflict. Then I wanted to give you 3 steps, because I think most people know how to pick up a phone. You know, I think we all know how to send a text. By the way, a conflict text should always be, can we talk? Yes. Not the subject itself. Right. Yes. Tone, there's no tone on text. You can't read body language. You can't just do not do it, okay? It doesn't go well. And then it's in writing. So don't do it. Actually have a conversation in front of people. But I think most people know how to organize a coffee. Most people know how to say, I'm sorry. Most people know how to say, hey, this hurt me. Most people know how to do that. But I think it's our feelings and our ideas around that moment of conflict that we are not comfortable with. And I think conflict will teach you out of 2 major ways, I think. You will either do it and learn the fruit of it, or you won't do it and you'll learn the pain of not doing it. And those 2 roads will lead you to be better at conflict. Yeah. But I have seen some people over the years that, sadly enough, just never have it. And I'll tell you what they end up alone, they end up bitter, they end up justified, they're the tortured genius. No one sees my perspective, but one day they will. And it's just never good. And I gotta say, one of my learnings, I'm always very transparent and open and honest about some of the things that we go through as leaders. But, last year was a conflict-driven year for Audrey and I, and I gotta say that one of my biggest mistakes was that I believed that things might get better if I don't have to talk about this one subject with this one person. Or maybe this is not the day to talk about that. And what I found was that the relationships in my life never got better by not talking about something.
Yeah.
And in fact, space gave room for innuendo, gave room for assumption, gave room for all these things, and then more space meant people don't care about each other, and then more space meant other people could fill the space with ideas and thoughts and things. And what I've learned is no relationship gets better by not having a conversation.
That's right, come on.
Yeah, that's good.
So if you've ever thought, I just don't know if I should say something, say something. I think that what you say and how you say matters, because it can make things better or worse. But I'll tell you what, not one relationship ever got better by saying nothing. Not one circumstance or situation got better by saying nothing. I think, and in those, there's that old idea of like, well, if you've got nothing nice to say nothing at all, and I'm just going to zip my mouth right now. Okay, that has some merit. But what I found is there is always a better response than silence. And biblically, it's love. Like biblically, it's understanding. Biblically, it's how did I hurt you? Like coming from a space of that, how did I upset you? But that is always better than nothing. Nothing does nothing. And nothing gives room for the enemy. And guess what? He's roaming. He's roaming constantly. And he is an accuser of the brethren. And he is constantly trying to bring things in and launch things and say things. And I just got to tell you that in my experience, my greatest regret in every relationship that has become like broken or fractured is that I should have said something. I should have said more. And even in my marriage, some things we've carried around, I'm like, man, if we would have had this conversation earlier, we would have been better. And here's a little tip. If you are a fast processor, like you think things quickly, slow down. Sometimes you being a fast processor bombards the other person and pushes them to silence, and that can be misconceived as agreeance. It can be misconceived as you're right because they had nothing to say. And the reality is they need time to process.
Yeah, that's very good.
It's okay to carry a conversation over 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours in a week. Leave some things with people. Know the people you're dealing with and know if they're fast processors or slow processors. If they're slow, say less and wait. Because Audrey and I process fast and she processes slow, and I would bombard her and really kind of barricade her, and she wouldn't get the opportunity to really speak. And then what would happen is I'd lose the opportunity of perspective, and that kind of put us in a place that created difficulties. So one of the best things you could do is if you are super witty, super fast, super quick, process on the fly, slow it down. Just get people's perspectives before you say something, and seek to ask questions more than make statements. Second thing, if you're going to do good conflict, fact find before you do anything else. Ask as many questions. How do you feel? What did I say? When did I do it? How many times have I done that? Okay, all right. Is there anything else? How long have you been? Whatever you can. Okay, tell me more on that. Okay, so that hurts you when I do that? Okay, and you don't like that? Or, okay, you took that as, just ask more questions. Ask as many questions as you can. Third thing is, always believe and ascribe things to a lack of competency more than bad intent. I've found that most of the time, 99.9 times, it's a lack of competency. The person didn't know how to express themselves. The person didn't realize that this was happening, or they, didn't have time to get to you, or they're not good with saying hello. Whatever it is, it's competency, not intent. I've found that most people are living very busy lives and with their own set of problems and their own set of pains and their own struggles. And they're usually consumed with that themselves. And we always ascribe it to something fully sinister. And it's not always sinister. It's just broken. Yeah, but I said it. That's cool. They didn't hear it. The misconception with communication is that it took place. And definitions are somewhat agreed upon, but hugely left to interpretation. So when you say something and they say it back to you, that doesn't mean that that's what they think it to be, or that's how they live that. You know what I mean? Like, it happens all the time. Like, I just had another conversation with someone. I think someone else recently just said, yeah, but when I say that, what that means to me is this. And I go, well, that means to me, it's like in some areas I'm super literal, and in other areas I'm kind of more ethereal. I kind of ebb and flow depending on if I'm dreaming and thinking future, or if I'm like going through what took place. If what took place, I don't get emotional at all. I get factual, which I had to learn that there's a space for emotion. But if I'm talking future, I get ethereal because I'm painting vision, and I've got to just get it big and get it out and then decide what's great. And so what I learned is I ebb and flow. Other people don't ebb and flow. Other people live emotional. Other people live factual. And I think what you've got to be able to do is go, hey, what does that mean to you? What I just said. Yeah. Like, and sometimes that's full conversations, but I'm just saying, like, give some space for these things. I think it really, really, really helps. And it helps people get out there. And yeah, I think those are some things that I think help with conflict. Believe the best in people, because people do. And then the last thing I'll say is this: most times you just hurt someone. Doesn't mean that what you did was really that hurtful, or maybe the worst, or maybe they're wounded, or maybe you're just abrasive. Who knows? All sorts of things. But I'll tell you that most things, it's just, it was hurtful.
Yeah.
And some conversations really go a long way.
Yeah.
So I say this because my hope is we build a better environment. We have better marriages. I want this talk to help you stay in your marriage. I want it to help you get to marriage. I want it to help you get to good leadership, and I want it to help you get to enjoying being on your team. So I got 4 minutes. I don't know if there's any questions or any thoughts, but I'm happy to clarify anything I've said that maybe didn't make sense or whatever.
I'm going to jump in because, man, this was so good, and I just have like a ton of questions, but I will just ask my most prominent one. How do you know when it is time to stop having the discussion? For example, I am not completely conflict averse. I'd rather have the conflict and like mend the issue than to let it be. I do understand that some people are conflict avoidant. It's difficult to know when to like broach things with someone sometimes, but how do you know when, I guess, in the midst of conflict, the other party maybe isn't receptive, maybe they don't want to move forward, it's been time, you've given them time to process, but it's not like working.
Yeah. Okay. I think one key thing in all of this is their response is not your responsibility.
Right.
Quite often we avoid having conversations afraid of the response, but the response is their responsibility, not ours. We can only control our responses, and to avoid a conversation, you've assumed that they will have a bad one, and you've got to give them credit that they will pull out a good one. The second thing is, when do you know to stop having conversations? I think 2 simple facts. 1, when you're ready to walk away from the relationship. A relationship that will stop talking is a relationship that just marked its death. So if you're not going to have a friendship anymore, fine, let's not talk. The second thing is this: when they won't reciprocate. You can't be the only one talking. So all you can do in that moment is leave your door open for when they are ready to talk. But I think if you're the only one talking, if you're the only one pouring into if your energy is the only one sustaining the relationship, that says something. If you're the only one inviting to dinner, and I'm talking about a friendship perspective, because we know that on the leadership side, we kind of talk about how Jesus had 12 follow him. Yeah. But when they followed him, he poured in, which is great. But so I'm talking more like on this like romantic or friendship relationship, from an energy of like hanging out. And then on a simple measure, I think discussion wise, 2 people have to talk. If you're sitting there and like they're just doing this, Like that's not great. Like even when we used to do a lot more marriage counseling, but now we just kind of focus more on our grow group because we don't have the capacity for more than the 20 something people that are in our group. We would always stop the counseling and just say, hey, it looks like only one of you wants to be here. When that changes, we're open to be in front of you again. But like for now, this is not really fruitful. So I think, yeah, they just both have to be wanting to talk. Lucky last. I don't know if there's a last one, quick one. We're good. All right. Well, I hope this helps maybe shift some of your mentality on it. I'd encourage you to keep praying through it, asking questions, reading books on it, reading the word on it. Conflict is a part of life, and it is honestly so rewarding. Don't be afraid of it. Don't let your past or the enemy paint bad pictures about it. It is a good thing. You could do it with a smile on your face. You could do it with calm. You could do it with tears and be honest, and you can do it with all sorts of ways, but it is a good thing. It salvages, it builds, and it draws you closer. It's vulnerable and it's transparent. Transparent is when you let people see things. Vulnerable is when you tell them things that they might not see. And I think it is a good thing for you to do, to be both vulnerable and transparent in relationships in order to get the most out of it. Let's change the paradigm on conflict, and let's come from some good conflict with our kids, with our marriages, with the people we lead, in our workplaces, our pastors, our leaders. Let's conflict up the chain, let's conflict down the chain, and let's be a healthier body. Cool?